Oh, we're live. I was watching the wrong corner. Welcome to While We Weren't Recording, where we talk about everything and anything except the Dresden Files. Today we are tentatively talking about video games and psychology. We're taking a break from Aeronauts Winless because we're short-staffed. So we're just shooting the shit, and we're starting with video games, and we'll see where it takes us.
Yeah.
What have you guys been playing lately?
Persona 5 Royal.
Good
What kind of
game.
game is that?
JRPG.
With like
how's
the
the-
most stylish menus ever.
Yeah, it is Anime the Game, which is what my husband sold it to me as several years ago. And it is Anime the Game. Sometimes it stops doing game stuff to do anime
yeah.
stuff instead.
Oh yeah.
I didn't play it much because I got caught up in addicting video games instead of like story games and probably actually good games. A game called Tales of Arise, which I will say is very anime the game in a way, and I think maybe at some point you should check that out. I have it on the Xbox PC Pass, so I pay a little subscription every month and I get a shit ton of games, and that's one of them. You might like it.
I've never heard of it before.
I hadn't either. I just looked at it and I was like, "Hey, this looks super anime." I've been watching a lot of anime. I'm gonna try this game, and it was pretty good. The little I played, the 5-6 hours I played, and then I got sucked into Dota 2 and Diablo.
The toxicity games that you needed.
Dota is very toxic, yes. Diablo not so much, though very addicting. Same with other I'm a sucker for those loot hunt games.
I'm way too competitive for those multiplayer games. That's my problem. As I what I need is good old fashioned stare at a map, zone out, and just
Single
min-max.
player.
Yeah, single player experience the whole way. That's one of the reasons I like JRPGs. Not because, and well, also I grew up on them back when they were like the best way to get a good story, and they're very tersely written. They didn't go all out. Kind of a fun story you can with great music. Nowadays are kind of overwritten, overdone, and the seams really show, I think.
The only other game that would be a JRPG that I've actually played is Chrono Trigger. And I only did one playthrough, not very much. Somebody was guiding me through it the whole time. But the music, if I had to point to both these games, both of them have fantastic music.
Oh yeah,
Like they take pride in that.
The only Japanese games I've played is that I really played is like the Final Fantasy MMO and Devil May Cry, and both of those have excellent music because it's like very guitar rock based, which I like, which you don't get that often in Western games. I feel like for some reason. It's not that much like straight up like more on the heavy side, whereas these seem to lean more into it. I don't know if that's just those games.
I'm gonna guess that it's probably just those games, but that games made by the Japanese take an aesthetic and go really, really into it much more than I think the Western games are going to do. I think they
they go way over. They go over the top a lot of the time.
Yeah, with the JRPGs, what I like about the JRPGs is the Chrono Trigger was a great example of this. With the right, it told you just enough of a story. Can you fill in the gaps? I think one of the problems with a lot of these big storytelling games is that they have such great capacity to tell you the story. It kind of you stop being able to fill in the gaps. It just starts being stop playing the game, watch a movie, or even very, very overwritten, or even overconfident about the writing. Where I think the strength of games is going to be in the gameplay and being able to play something out.
I'm definitely more of a gameplay first. Story and flavor is kind of like secondary, which is in a way weird because I mostly play RPGs. It's just those RPGs where it's about the loot and killing bosses and monsters and such.
And numbers go up.
Yeah, big numbers.
Oh, yeah,
find better stuff to get bigger numbers to kill bigger
the
things.
The map games are the same way, right? You play a Paradox game and it's still numbers go up or line goes up or map
Paradox
paint the map.
games are you can't pinhole them quite so much like that.
My roommate loved Paradox games. There's only
I love
one
them.
I've played with him I actually enjoy, and that's Crusader Kings.
2 or 3?
The newest one.
3.
So 3.
I have never played
It's really
3. I don't know how many hours I've actually done of Crusader Kings 2. And numbers go up. I mean, in a way, that's a goal of like you want more money, you want more prestige, and that. But that's it's a resource. It's a different kind of unfolding story, and it's not the same thing as like when you're playing Dota and you want big numbers because big hits because big numbers.
But also because there's a discrete win condition with EU4 and with. Well, I know Victoria is numbers go up because it's an economy simulator more than a war simulator. With EU4, its numbers go up so that you can paint the map. And I get stuck in one of those two traps when I try to play Crusader Kings. I can't ever feel like I'm role playing because if I really get into the role play, then I just want to do what I think is the right thing to do. I don't really want to do, pretend that I'm a character and play like, here's the evil playthrough, here's the other playthrough. I'm just trying to be the lawful good playthrough because I think, oh no, I'm really into this personal story. And the problem with that is you only see a third of the content that way, and it gets really repetitive super quick. And then what I fall back on is the map painting. I fall back on the map painting because of that.
You can
I would
play
not have
Crusader
expected
Kings
that
in
out of you.
so many ways, though, Ben. Like, if you get invested, I mean, okay, so for me, sure, I usually in those kind of games where it's like it's narratively driven in a way, I often have a playthrough this is what I would do, like me. But I also do playthroughs of like what would the character do and get vastly different like results or like you know what I mean. But if you get invested, you always go with like, okay, you fall back to what would I do because you're invested.
Yeah, now. I can't end up playing a character. It has to be. I have to have some kind of compartmentalization, and that always seems kind of.
Have you ever played like Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, but I always end up playing the good.
You always end up playing Ben.
I always end up trying to do the clever thing. I might do like weird, quirky. It'll be some other aspect of my personality, but Crusader Kings doesn't have that much freedom. It ends up being a lot of kind of moral choices or min-max choices. Do you want to become neurotic or
I don't know. I mean, okay. So in Crusader Kings 3, this is the only one I played. So if you're talking about 2, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know 3. I only know 3.
Yeah. The one thing I often do when it's just okay, default playthrough with friends or default playthrough myself. It's been a while since I played, but I always go for like eugenics and just try to breed like a master bloodline with super good inherited stats and stuff. And that's like because I think that's fun. But
eugenicist, right?
Yeah. Where and I've also had games like playthroughs where it's like, okay, so now I'm gonna play this king that's like or family or whatever that's like super. They want to unify this part. That's their goal, and I go for that. I don't care about the min-max so much. I feel like you can do both, but I mean,
I know people can. It's just that's one of my limitations, and so I end up falling back. I've been doing a lot more EU4, Europa Universalis 4, because that has a pretty discrete the first 100 years, second 100 years, and maybe get into the third 100 years and stop before the Age of Revolutions because it just gets boring. Kind of try to ramp from adverse circumstances. So you might want to that becomes much more interesting to me because it's kind of like this puzzle challenge still. Partially because also I don't have that much experience with the game, still at only 1,000 hours. Apparently, once you start getting...
Is EU4 easier for you to focus on the puzzle or the like survivability of it because it's less character?
I think, you know what? Yeah, so with I'm just trying to think about talking out of my head with Crusader Kings 3. It is so you see the face to everything, and there's a very strong feeling of family connections and a rivalry and characters doing their own thing and interacting, and so it seems like a more real personal choices with a real ethical decisions. Whereas in EU4, I mean, theoretically, I could go for the all sorts of things that sound terrible on their face, like the native suppression policy or the trading bonus in slaves. And it doesn't have the same effect because it's also abstracted and it's not very flavorful, other than just generally being paint the map green or
Right.
blue or
So,
red.
I mean,
whatever color.
in both Crusader Kings and EU4, you're playing some kind of government, but when it goes from being a person, a monarchy, and those personal stories versus being more like, I don't want to say like a parliament, but you're
It's really like this
abstractly,
abstract national identity, right?
yeah.
That's
Yeah, you're
all it
playing the
is.
nation, you're not playing the bloodline, which Crusader Kings is
Sure.
about your bloodline and your dynasty.
Right.
And I mean, so CK2 is the only one I've played. It's basically it's court intrigue, the game.
Oh yeah.
It's
Oh yeah.
That's
And you
definitely
have that option.
There's
You have
so,
that
but
option in
there's
CK3.
so many. At least in 3, there. You're right. Court intrigue, big part of the game. But there's so many different aspects or ways you can play that game. I feel like it's very open ended in that way. At least in 3, I think it's more than just court intrigue the game.
I mean, okay.
Well, I think court intrigue in the game is fine because that's the level the decision making are usually making. Again, although maybe my perspective is limited because I only ever played it on release. It had a really solid, really great release, and I didn't really get into any of the expansion mechanics, which never seemed to.
I've only played with expansion mechanics. I got it like on sale at some point.
maybe
with
that's
a lot of
it.
That's
expansions.
another thing about Paradox games is the expansions. They become necessary as they fix things in the past and they tweak things.
So
in the past.
I'm probably going to get the expansions at some point once they're $20 altogether on Humble Bundle, like they've done for EU4 every other year for the last 5 years.
Because otherwise it's hundreds of dollars at once.
The Paradox game gets outrageously expensive, but I will also give them a plus here, where at least when I tried the Stellaris with my friend, he really loves it. I don't really like it. I think it's just like a spreadsheet simulator, a EVE Online or something, and I'm not really that into it. But they give you all the expansion content in any multiplayer game for all the friends you invite. They're gonna have like there's like a free version of Stellaris. Essentially, you're gonna have for nothing or a free, and you can play all the expansion content with your friend. So I think that's
they do that. So if you have one friend that has forked out hundreds of dollars to have all of the expansions, and you do the multiplayer, but then of course the multiplayer has its own issues with desyncing. Ask me how I know. The being able to do it single player has its own benefits. It's just your play style of it is what I find really interesting here. Of like the personal story is a distraction to you, Ben. It interrupts your ability to play the game. It is the story of the game, though, is this dynastic story of you have the person and whatever history, and yes, you're trying to build a bloodline. You're trying to grab bloodlines from other dynasties, and the bloodline,
the whole bloodline play was great fun for me when I was start off Irish and super develop Ireland and make it the most developed city, but then also you're able to advance through the technology so fast because it's such a small culture back before they added the various other mechanics, and it was fun. It's just that after about the 4th or 5th character, I started seeing the same events over and over. There's only so many places a scripted choose your own adventure can go. You kind of have to have more content after a while, and that's what they've been doing. Obviously, that's what they work. That's how they work. So but it's always going to be at a slower pace because I'm not going to be interested in doing like the witchcraft stuff, or I'm not really interested in Norse cannibalism or founding a religion. I do know. So
you know what? Actually, when I'm thinking about it,
there's a lot of things like that that I'm not interested in, and if that's how people can gotta see how wild and crazy it gets, and there's that lurid freak show element to it, I mean, whatever. But for me, my fun is in the court intrigue on a kind of personal level, but the choices are not very subtle, and there's not very many of them. And when there are many of them, they will repeat every couple generations. And meanwhile, what I really want is I want to get my family legacy to max level. I want to be, and I want to have the.
It would be interesting, I think, if you played the essentially finished game of CK2, because it has all of the expansions already done. They're done developing it.
True.
and you had all of the content, you would have a lot more options. I mean, granted,
no
the
doubt.
Hermetic Society or the Satanism, maybe you're not really interested in that
Not
because you don't
enough.
like the witchcraft and stuff. It's just like, it's just a game, dude. You can go cannibalize a baby and get weird, interesting things. You can get glitter hoof, and like it
So
is
glitter hoof is
sometimes,
just silly. I get glitter
yeah,
hoof.
it's off
That
the
whole
wall
thing is
still.
sure. That's fine.
That's not a
Um,
term I know.
There's a
Oh,
CK2. Yeah, you can end up marrying a horse and making it or having an heir or something
so
because you've gone crazy.
yeah, your character has gone insane. You have decided that your horse Glitterhoof is going to be one of your counselors in your government, and if you can manage the game in certain ways, you can try to get Glitterhoof to marry somebody to therefore have more horse babies and therefore populate your court with horses and crazy things like that.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what, and that's kind of those weird fantasy elements, which at some level. So there are weird fantasy elements in other Paradox games. EU4 is a great example because you can have this whole, even before the latest expansion, this whole reverse invasion of Europe by native tribes. I did a whole playthrough as Cherokee to get the No More Trail of Tears achievement, which is pretty much exactly what it sounds. Control the Eastern Seaboard, have all the institutions embraced, so advanced level of the game. And there's a mission that lets you, if you control so many provinces in Europe, you click it and you become like the most powerful units in the game, High American. So it's kind of like a reward for putting up with having the worst units in the game, some of the worst units in the game for a long time. So there's some weird fantasy elements here that are fun to play with, but
there's a lot of like, there's just so many ways you can play. Like I always go for the blood and genetics, having good traits thing.
Sure. Well, that's my problem is there are so many ways to play, but I find a rut and I just stick there.
I mean, I do as well in a different way. Like I always end up being Norse pagans and trying to reform paganism and out with the Catholics and burn them. And it's like, yeah, it's just my thing.
My roommate tries to make a great Nordic empire without converting away from paganism, and he has yet to succeed because it's really hard to unify.
It is pretty hard because like, especially because of the inheritance system of like if you become Christian, then you can do the primogeniture inheritance and you can keep things more intact versus I forgot the term, agnatic, whatever. Yeah, it's hard when everything breaks up upon your death. But I have a side question.
That's also been his problem. From what I remember when he talks about it, is when the character, it's just getting together, but when the character dies, everything splits up and he has to try and gather it again.
Yeah, and so therefore you want only one inheriting son and not multiple.
He's been assassinating his own children and stuff trying to make it work. Yeah.
Have you ever played Dwarf Fortress, Ben?
I know, but I've played RimWorld, which scratches a similar itch, but it's not the same thing. I know, but
it is not the same. It is, but I would be very interested in seeing how you engage with Dwarf Fortress. In that RimWorld, you have a colony of like a handful of people, maybe up to like, I don't know, 20. I don't remember if there was a population max. In Dwarf Fortress, you can put that up to, especially with your personal settings, like 200. And it's
it feels more like a colony management, giant colony management with lots of random events, and it's permadeath, and it just ends. Because things get out of hand, basically.
No matter, so at some point you're going to fail. It is great, and there's a story that it unfolds as you're doing it, and you're trying to manage this colony of people and everything. But because you have a high level view on the fortress, you basically set up like work orders. And you are a manager of basically of like this needs to happen at this point, otherwise people are going to get unhappy, and you're just kind of like the trade in, trade out, and the things like that. Versus RimWorld is, it doesn't go as complicated as I would like it to be, which is why I prefer Dwarf Fortress. But it is closer to the people, and I wonder which one you would prefer more.
Yeah, I because it seems like on paper I should like it more because I was just saying how much I love stories where I can fill in the gaps and the emergent gameplay stuff, and you grow attached to the characters over time. And yet, some of my more favorite games that I've really played have had a very strong, carefully crafted sense of atmosphere with a very small focus and very tight gameplay. Stuff like Invisible Ink is a favorite of mine. If you've heard of it, it's basically cyberpunk dystopia heist simulator, and like
I have to ask, how many of these favorite games of yours are like in black and white?
Ha 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 ha. Now that he asks, actually, I think there is a very strong blue-gray theme in Invisible Link, but there's red there too. I promise.
I had a feeling. Just when you said Invisible Link, I was like, that sounds like a black and white game. I wonder if it is.
But like, let's see. So this, so it's tightly crafted atmosphere with a very clear vision of what the game is. Smaller indie titles. I mean, Treasure Adventure Game. Have you ever heard of that one?
Mm-mm.
It was free on GOG for ages, and then sold pixel version, and then the hand drawn version came out. And I didn't play that one, but it's kind of just a Metroidvania, indie Metroidvania with kind of a quirky personality.
Have you played Starbound?
No, I haven't. I've wanted to though. That's on my wish list.
Okay, I watched my husband play it a little bit. I've never gotten into it myself, but it looks like it's kind of a thing that you want. If you have a character, you have a ship, you go exploring things, but it's also really kind of cozy.
Yeah, I feel like, and yet at this point in my life, I kind of feel like I want to play games where it's very rich, very tight, and I won't miss anything in the first playthrough because I won't get a second. So as much as I loved Tears of the Kingdom, I haven't been able to finish it. Even
and it's kind of counter to you saying you really like emerging gameplay. So that's kind of like,
Yeah, I kind of do, but I never played Tears of the Kingdom with emergent gameplay. I kind of always looked up, okay, what's the best, most efficient thing to build, and just use that. And now I have a flying thing, the little flying scooter thing with the handlebars.
Oh yeah, that sucked up a lot of hours of like, so how do you build the specific thing with the least amount of components to be able to balance it correctly, to be able to fly.
I love the idea of having a big construction set, but I don't have the patience or creativity to use it anymore. It feels like it's really kind of sad. Oh man, I don't know.
I do think how Ben, like I had this thought earlier. Let's see if I can like grasp onto it again. How Ben described how he likes, like, very specifically in Crusader Kings, like, and then it always ends up being the same playthrough.
Yeah, and no matter which character I play, the only difference is whether I have a long reign or a short reign, and it kind of is otherwise the same thing over and over.
Because it made me think. Oh, okay. I don't know if I'm going to say this correctly, because like I had this thought and now I'm not sure if I have it gathered anymore. But it made me think of how there's something like when we've done movies and other media, there's like some things where it's just like me, Alex, and Justin, even if we maybe like Alex's favorite book series, or one of her favorite book series we did,
Locked Tomb.
Yeah. Where it was interesting enough that it kept me and Justin engaged, even though there was also aspects.
That was like the gothic horror, quirky
lesbian necromancers in space investigating murder mystery, crazy stuff.
It was definitely not my cup of tea. I don't remember too much about it. I don't want to talk about it, so I don't remember too well.
Yeah, it is one of those books that it's the series. You have to pay attention. And you have to read it multiple times.
Honestly, what I recall, what really got me with trying to read that book was the mentions of pornography and like treating it like here's in a joking way. I was like, not really my thing. I'm out. It wasn't even like necromancers or the lesbian or the space or like the grimdark, because I've read grimdark before. But I
was kind of getting to my point here, where it's like I think that there are certain topics and stuff where like there's very little that's off limits for me, and I'll just take the story for what it is, and I'll like it or I don't. But like there can be all kinds of stuff in it, but for you it's very much like there are these things in it, and then it's just like,
I've had a life where I've indulged in a lot of things I've had a life where I've been completely open. I'm at the point where I kind of know where I am and what's good for me, and I think it's one of those kind of things that we should have talked 20 years ago. We've had a very different conversation. Sorry to say, and I don't want to say that as an excuse. That's just kind of what's
But
happened
if
over the years. That's raising kids and all that.
have you read the first law books by Joe Abercrombie?
Never heard of it. Have you?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, I was talking about Director Alex.
Oh, sorry.
I read the first book.
Oh, okay, First Law. What's the premise?
It's
a grimdark.
Yeah, it's grimdark, but it's also I would say it has some of the I wouldn't even say some of the best characters I have yet to experience. Like they're all. I mean, since this grimdark, it's like they're kind of assholes, but also they're very real. They're very realized.
There's a lot of in-depth description of their views of the world.
Sure.
So it's not just a character is moving through this thing. Like Glokta is the one that is most known from those books because he is a raging asshole, but he's also severely crippled because of horrific torture. And so in the chapters that are in his point of view, when he has to go upstairs,
why did it have to be stairs?
Yeah, he is hateful because of how much pain he is in. There's a lot of description of his struggles and his difficulties when he's talking because his teeth has been mangled, the fact that he can't eat regularly because of his teeth. It's a very full experience of his life in his points of view in those chapters. And it's grimdark.
I would say it's I've read the entire first trilogy. There's a second trilogy. There's 3 standalone books as well in between. I've read all of that, and I've read the short story collection, which I believe is everything there is in that world. And every single story is amazing. They have great twists, great turns, great characters. The world's super interesting. You can feel how he has pretty methodically planned out what is happening in the real world. It's all super tightly connected together. There's these nice little references to things where it's like, okay, I would have missed that if I hadn't read this standalone book, but I know who that character is. But it doesn't take away from the enjoyment if you didn't. It's just they're so good. But it's like I said, like there's a lot of sex, violence, death, people being assholes. Like it's all that it's very human, right? But the darker side of humanity, but also some of the good. Sadly, Alex hasn't read the new trilogy because there's a character there who has like probably the best character development I have yet to experience in any media. Because it's like a book I would love for people to read, but I think they probably wouldn't like it though.
I looked up the description, and the thing that it interested me, and maybe this is helpful. I saw that it was set on the cusp of a kind of an early modern Renaissance society in kind of a vaguely Mediterranean milieu, and it's on the cusp of the Industrial Revolution.
Yes,
and that honestly, that I think maybe there's the history angle that I like, because that really
it's very
piqued my interest more than anything that I've read about it. Then
the first 3 books, Renaissance, medieval feeling, some of those things, and then we get like in the interconnecting 3 standalone stories. We see this development towards the industrial revolution and age, and then the next trilogy is like full blown. There are factories. There's a plot about workers rioting because they're like, and children being used because they're like they're like really cheap labor, so just being stuffed into factories and they're just sleeping there. All that stuff. It's pollution. There are these insanely powerful men behind the curtains pulling the strings, and like you have to guess who and what's happening. And all these books are so good. Like I can't express enough how good they are. Like there's this one character called Logan Nine Fingers, or the Bloody Nine, he's also called, and his story arc in the first trilogy, and then there's a standalone with him. I mean, I can't put it into words without really spoiling it. They're so good.
Yeah.
I love these. I should listen to them again. Also, the audiobooks, out of this world. He's so good.
Good.
So, if that setting of the industrial burgeoning moment,
that transition thing,
right?
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Powder Mage trilogy?
Oh, I read those. They're great.
I'm in the middle of the second book.
Which trilogy?
It's Powder Mage trilogy by Brian McClellan.
No, haven't heard of it.
Okay, so it starts with an old military general. He's like 60s, having murdered the king, or like done a coup in order to execute the king, and then the problems start. It's not a build up to the coup. It's not a heist. It's like they did it successfully, and now there's more problems than they expected. And they have guns. They have magic. They talk about some of the manufacturing about guns, but mostly because the magic is inside gunpowder in at least one of the mages. That's why they're powder mages. They use the gunpowder.
Sure.
And it's political. It talks about the factories. It talks about economics. It talks about a lot of magic. I am really enjoying it. I don't know if it would qualify as a grimdark. It's not necessarily hopeful.
It's less grimdark than the first Law.
Yeah,
it's more grimdark than Brandon Sanderson, where I would like compare his magic systems to Powder Mage. I'd say it's more grimdark than his. Even though his can get pretty dark, they're generally not as dark.
Yeah, Sanderson has he wants a through line message of hope and happy. Eventually, even throughout all of the darkness, he wants some form of happy. This has a real sense of like it really might not work out correctly because of things that they didn't understand because of magic cabals and stuff like that. There's a lot of like spy intrigue. There's a character that's an investigator, and it's a lot of lies and a lot of different types of magic mechanics of like there's the guns, there's like something more traditional type of magic that you might recognize. There's small bits of knacks. People might have a knack. There's a character who he doesn't need to sleep. So ever. He never needs to sleep. One of the characters that's an investigator has a knack of a perfect memory. So it's a lot of different types of magic.
I really like the specialized people, how powerful they can also be. Like it's like super like focused, but in that area they're just like really good at something, and it's so cool. It's this magic system in these books are stellar.
I think it's easier to talk. I'm not having read that. I think it's based on what you're saying. Maybe I can compare something that I really do like and see where it lands. Because I think probably the best fiction book I've ever read and the most satisfying read I've ever had was Lord of the Rings. And I know that's kind of a normie thing to say at this point, but it's true for me because it's.
I mean, I found them really hard to like really boring. I'm not gonna lie about that.
I get why. I found it very, very, very rich literary, but I think I'm not looking for cheap, happy endings, and I think that the grimdark is kind of a reaction against the cheap, happy ending. I think Tolkien gets accused of having the cheap, happy ending, the good triumphs over evil. But I think there's a lot more going on there, where it's the books are about as much about the pettiness of evil, but also the cost of good things. And of course, the ending isn't even a virtuous action. It is Frodo fails at the end.
Mm-hmm.
He pours out everything and he still fails, but then evil destroys itself anyway.
Of a cheap happy ending is to misunderstand the whole of it.
But I mean, everything from like, and it's like such a popular take. It's literally the take you find on epic rap battles of history, right? Where George R.R. Martin is set up as the realistic guy, and Tolkien is set up as the idealistic fantasy guy, which is so far from what Tolkien is. I don't know about George R.R. Martin, but it's certainly what Tolkien is. So,
George R.R. Martin mostly just describes food.
He describes a lot of things. It does the it's food, but it's also kind of the torture and all of the bad moments and a lot of horrific deaths. But the evil people plotting things is kind of the big stuff.
Yeah, I've
Right,
since
right.
Game of Thrones, especially when it was up in the pop culture, and I loved the show. I tried to read the first book. I think I started it like 6 times. I just never could get through it. I was just like, there's just so much description of things that I found tedious.
I don't remember that out of the first book. I have to say I stopped somewhere in the fourth book, I think, because the description of travel where I knew it wasn't going anywhere just kind of got to me.
I'm glad it didn't start because I would have expected another book to have come out since I tried back then, but it hasn't. So good thing I didn't. To be honest.
So I have another game question, Ben. Have you ever
Yeah.
any of the Rockstar games like GTA, Red
You know what?
Dead Redemption, or
I don't know if I'd have the stomach for it anymore, but I did. I was a big GTA 3, San Andreas, especially Vice City kind of guy. I mean,
okay,
it embraced its anarchy, but I won't try
right?
to I won't try to justify a love of that because I don't know that I have the stomach for it anymore. Because I was big into that when I was in high school.
All right. So
I found it's like my favorite thing to do is just drive around and uh, drive around listening to Chatterbox. So
right.
that I mean that's the level of appreciation I had for it. I memorized the names of all the cars and did all the side missions and completionist thing. I love the completionist thing. Strong personality, strong soundtrack, but mostly
So
the dirty jokes. Honestly, that was a teenager. That was ages ago.
did you play LA Noir?
And yeah, I did actually. I found that I kind of groaned at some of the choices the character made, but it did feel like a noir movie, which another thing that I grew up on. And I actually played that fairly recently in the last 5-6 years. So I don't know that I would. I think it was. I loved the kind of the novelty of seeing somebody attempt the kind of Chinatown noir aesthetic story and a one-to-one
Forget
recreation of
about
Los
it.
Angeles.
Chinatown.
But uh, I think my quibbles with it were not in its theming or story execution, but in like some of the problems that everyone had with the game. That the game mechanics were a bit fussy
Oh,
to deal with.
the lie in the conversations.
That, then also like the shooting sections.
Press X to doubt. You're lying, you son of a bitch! Slap!
Yeah.
Right. So
When I did
so
a solid playthrough,
that's a game mechanics thing, not a theming thing. I think we're talking more
yes,
theming.
yes,
I loved
because
the theme of that.
I mean, okay, so I love LA Noir because it's noir. It's like made for me, except for the fact that I'm really, really bad with controllers, and so every like the guns, I sucked at it. I wouldn't have noticed that the game mechanic of guns sucked at because it was just bad all around. I cannot drive in those games to the point of sometimes I would just hand the controller over to my husband, like, get me to the spot, please.
I'm so
Um,
bad at driving in those games with a controller to like GTA as well, right?
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but the fact that Phelps was such a strong character, and yes, he made bad decisions sometimes, but
Yeah.
it was really evident. Like you were watching this movie essentially.
And it was clear he was tearing his life apart
Yes, but
stupidly, but and that's what he was doing though. It's kind of a
it was
PTSD story
yeah,
that all the
it was
characters
a
have.
role playing game, but you are not allowed to role play yourself. You are
It's
role
kind of
playing
like with The
Phelps.
Witcher, right?
Well, right, because there were no real choices there, and
Yeah,
that's and I don't. You know what? The Witcher is another good example that I could have done without. I didn't. I don't not really into the sex scene stuff, but The Witcher was another great example of giving choices while maintaining a character having real character, rather than just constructing a character. So if you're handed a character and you have the 3 or 4 possible choices that character would have said, and you
mhm,
choose one of them, rather than good choice, bad choice, middle choice, sarcasm of
yeah.
a Fallout 4 or whatever
Witcher
else.
3 did certainly seem like you have a lot of places where you can go with this
Mhm.
character and the background that it is set.
Within the
But
boundaries
there's
of a character who's an actual personality.
yes, but you
Right.
can like there are also like plot reasons as to why Geralt can have a change of personality and he can be completely different between the different playthroughs and it still feel like the same character. It was very complicated to balance that, and they did a really good job in that.
Yeah, no, that's really brilliant. Yeah. Um, so I really praise that. I mean, what to pull that off is so rare. The CD Projekt Red hasn't even been able to do that, and the games that tried to, I've heard that Red Dead Redemption 2 does that. Great for that. But then there's also the issue of when it's a big AAA title, there's a secondary issue of crunch, which kind of makes me uncomfortable for these immersive experiences when I can't help but think during one of the big immersive experiences these days that it came from people sacrificing horrible amounts of time and families. And I realized that was probably true back in the days of GTA. I just didn't know about it at the time. So it's a bit of a barrier to that immersion for me. I know you have strong opinions.
I don't know if I have strong opinions. I have, I think it's wrong for employers to exploit people and for them to exploit the fact that these people love to make video games. But I also think in many ways it is, it's software development in the end. It's they could be doing something else. They could be making spreadsheet programs or websites or whatever. They stay there and they decide to do these things. So you're also kind of just like think, oh, I feel bad about playing this game now because these other people made decisions that were bad for them. Therefore, I now don't like playing this AAA game.
When we first starting, I was just reading Anthony Bourdain's first article in the New Yorker. You remember Anthony Bourdain?
I know who he is.
Yeah, it was his first big breakthrough was all about. Actually, have you seen the show Chef?
Yes. Okay.
It's basically how Chef is real life in North. It's in 1999. Basically, that's basically what the article was. And kitchens are dysfunctional, full of misfits and drug users, and people are abusive and yell at each other and throw things and hurt each other all the time. And that's kind of they play fast and loose with a lot of things, even if they keep things really clean. So I think that with creatives in general, that's a problem too. That level of passion, commitment, insanity, pushing yourself past the limit. And I still go to restaurants, right? So maybe I'm a hypocrite. That's very possible. But I do think there's a level of I don't want to be callous about this. I think that a good manager should be able to see that people are pushing themselves too far and recognize it and say, dude, take a break. You're going crazy. You're having a mental breakdown. You need to, and I know you're very helpful, but and that level of even if it extends the deadline or delays the game a little bit, I think that's good management is to be able to tell people to stop when they need to.
Sure, but okay, I don't. There's a focus on this because people super invested in video games, and then you're like video games, therefore you know about it. But this is not only a video game problem. Even if they switch to doing, let's say they go work for Microsoft instead to develop Microsoft Teams, right? There's probably still some crunch there, but it's way less, and they get paid way more. And if you can work,
make Microsoft Teams to stop being paid, so they stop doing shit and fucking with it. Sorry.
If you work at a AAA game developer, at least I'm just going to talk from the people who can code part because that's what I know about. You could do any of these other things, get paid more, and have less crunch. You're choosing to do that. Right?
Yeah, and the people should take care of them. That's
yes. Can I tell you about this cool thing we have here in Denmark called unions?
Well, can union tell people to stop working?
Can we what, sorry?
Do you? I mean, we have unions too. Do unions tell people to stop working? I mean, they should.
Don't they say you cannot work more than a certain amount of hours at a certain time? I thought they did.
Yeah, but people do that anyway, right? That's
sure. That's an individual's choice, right?
Right, but the whole problem is people making choices that are harming themselves.
Yes,
and the management should be able to recognize it while wanting the best talent, the kind of people who would want to do this. You also want to take care of them.
Okay, so. You and me, we make decisions that are harming. Like you've lost weight, right? But you're still overweight. I'm fat. Should people come over and slap the burger out of our hands because we're harming ourselves?
Well, if those people are, I mean, my wife should, yeah. So people with
You're
that kind of
not okay.
relationship and
So
authority,
the people close to these people who are in these jobs should tell them, dude, you're hurting yourself. You're working too much. But why should
absolutely.
you
I'm not
deprive
saying. See, I'm not
yourself?
saying it. That's what I'm
No, but
saying.
why
Is I
should
think
you
there should be.
feel bad about playing a game made by a AAA developer?
Well, I do think that there's something going on. I don't have direct control over it. It's just an issue of I feel like it's fruit from a poison tree, and I'm not sure what's going on there,
Sure,
but
but isn't that also just
it makes
any
me
major
uneasy.
industry? Don't you think the movies you like and they're like newer movies, probably a lot of crunch there. We know that for a fact in Marvel movies, for example,
Yeah,
with
right.
the 3D animations and all that stuff. They're on the. That's why it's getting worse. Like it's because they're under insane crunch.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a problem. That's a problem.
yes.
I actually hadn't heard about Marvel movies in particular. I haven't watched them in a while, but I haven't heard that
Yeah,
that
the
there's particular
graphics
crunch.
have categorically gotten worse in those movies, and largely from what when you're told from insiders and stuff is they're under so much crunch, like we're like slamming out Marvel movies and getting all the effects done that like the thing like the quality's dropping because they can't do it in time. But it's
Yeah,
also whatever else other major industry or anything you really like to do or go to,
well,
people are being exploited for
yeah, that's a
wage or
huge problem.
for not. Yeah,
That's a huge
that
problem. I think that's a huge problem. I think it's part of the. We talk about line goes up, numbers go up. If the economy is dependent on numbers go up, it's always going to come at the expense of somebody,
yes,
and it's probably going to be the employees. And even
yes,
if it's a CEO, sometimes it's at least the employees, and that's a huge problem. So
maybe
I don't, and so
or
I
even
don't.
further down. But yeah, it's also
Yeah,
um
now we are getting political. Shame Justin isn't here.
it's the I don't disagree. Like, it's just I don't generally want like for example here with my entertainment. I don't want to feel bad because other people have made like decisions that were bad for them
Sure.
when they
Because people are
effective.
free to make bad
Yeah,
decisions for
people are
themselves.
free to make bad decisions. I make bad decisions all the time. That's why I am massively overweight. Like
Sure.
it's it's but I do agree. Like we do. The fundamental problem is the whole. I don't even think necessarily capitalism is the problem. In theory, capitalism can be fine. The problem is like in stage capitalism and infinite growth, and like every quarter must be better instead of just being we have profit, we're profitable,
Right.
or it's going around. It must always be
Well, sure.
more, and we're on a planet with finite resources. You can't have more forever.
I think ultimately part of the problem is going to be that a lot of growth in the economy has been in the dissolution of things that used to be done for free. Like instead of families living together, they're split up into nuclear families, which is kind of a cash grab. And then your kids go off to college and they have their own household. They have to have their own things. There's more things they have to buy, and college becomes necessary, and it's a huge expense. And there's a lot
College is
of
free here.
well, sure, whatever it is. Uh, uh, there's a lot of issues with just completely trying to build markets where there don't have to be markets. I'd say maybe part of the problem is if the problem is companies are answerable to shareholders, then why should things be publicly traded? I think private investment and private relationship should govern quite a bit more of how we handle
I mean, I
investment
think
and that kind of
ultimately,
thing.
like something like the stock market and publicly traded company, etc. That whole system very limited knowledge about it, but it seems absolutely rotten to the core from what I've seen. Like it's
Well,
just
and yeah, money tends to hide. Uh, if you look at $100 bill, you tend to think it has value, but that value is going to be less the very next year from inflation.
Mhm.
So rather than
And
dealing
God
with
forbid
things,
you
deal
go
with
to your
abstraction.
employer and be like, well, inflation up's 10%. I want at least 10% plus. I would like some more actually, because I feel like I'm providing more value than I'm being paid. And they're like, wait, what? No, you can't get inflation.
Sure.
Like, we're gonna
And
give 5%.
here's the irony: I'm in a union, so I can't do that at all. I'm forbidden by the union from negotiating a higher salary. So that's a whole other level of conversation.
But
Yeah,
the
we
plus
can
side is then you have collective bargaining, and you're in a stronger position.
Yeah,
The
I
problem
live in a more
is, do you
expensive
trust
area.
the people bargaining for you?
The problem for us is that the union's too big. We have people living in a much cheaper part of the state that's part of the same union, and so I live in a very expensive part of the state. So, but our salaries are the same. So the negotiation of the salary goes up for all of us. That's the whole point of the union. But because it's not local, it's still a bit too distant. It
But don't
ends
you
up
have other
mattering.
unions you could join?
No, there's only the one.
Okay,
And even if I'm not union,
yeah, we
even
have
if I'm not
multiple
union,
unions,
the
right?
salary. Well, even if I'm not in this union, the salary goes up for non-union members at the exact same rate. That's part of how teachers' unions work.
We have something similar for public workers, like which is also there's a systematic problem there. I hate here, like in my country, I can try to explain where it's like they work for the government, right? They're public workers. Let's say they're nurses, because this happened multiple times. They go on strike because they don't feel like they're getting paid enough for the amount of work and stress they have to endure. So they stop working and go on strike, and then it's like that's the Danish model. That's all well and good. Then the problem is this Danish model that people talk about being so great. When it comes to public workers, okay, so they strike. They're not being met. They are negotiating essentially with their employer, which is ultimately the government. And then the government, the parliament, are like, okay, enough's enough. They've striked for 2 months, and they make they've done this like 2 times, a special law or special demand. I don't remember exactly what the wording is, but like you have to go back to work, even though your demands were not met. In which case, the whole point of this well-touted Danish model goes out the window, and it annoys me a lot.
Yeah.
People talk so great about it, but when it comes to public workers, it just gets shafted because there's like essentially no, and eventually the government's like, no, we need our healthcare system to work. We do need our healthcare system to work, but they also have a right to strike.
So I think in terms of a lot of things we've been talking about with crunch and stuff, one point I want to point out is I think it's a little different when it comes to necessary things versus entertainment. I think I can get a recorder and learn to play a song, and that's entertainment. I don't need to have a subscription to a movie service or buy a video game or anything like
But
that.
your life sure is a lot better when you do have that.
Is it? I don't know. Maybe it's different with family and kids. So I think the dynamics are a little different.
It's better for me anyway.
Well, I'm glad. I'm not trying to make any. I don't know your life. I'm just saying in terms of order of necessity, right? Food, shelter, water, safety. That's important. The second level is comfort, and I think things at the level of comfort are easier for me to say I'm not comfortable doing that, because again, if I'm not comfortable playing the game or watching the movie with crunch behind it, then at the very least, even if it's moral, whether it's moral or immoral, at the very least, it's not serving its purpose, because now I'm comfortable and I'm supposed to be comfortable. And so you see the problem. If I were to choose a path of greatest comfort, it would be to not do that, because it does make me uncomfortable for whatever reason, rather than make my peace with it. So, and I don't think that's a strong argument, because I think the real issue is one of morality, good or bad. But even if the issue is just comfort, I think it works out.
I would argue then that that's a standpoint you can have. I mean, like I said, ultimately I think people make their own decisions, right? And I'm gonna feel bad for them deciding to, especially not in the Western world, where I would say we might be wage slaves, but we can choose where we're wage slaves, I guess.
Yeah.
But then you can't really do anything AAA movie or show, like all these things, like even indie, you don't really know, because they might be super crunched. Okay, so is it okay for you? Let's say it's an indie developer. It's like one guy making a game, but he's working 14 hours a day, and because he's super passionate, but he's also crunching, and he's like super stressed about it. You just don't know about it because it's not like widespread, but he might be suffering just as much.
I would just hope that people have. That's one of the things I actually appreciate about indie communities, is usually the feedback an indie developer gets is from fans. They usually say, dude, take care of yourself, rather than, where's the game? I'm going to kill you right now, which is kind of the kind of death threats that AAA studios get. But when it's the one person, like a concerned ape or something, they say, hey, man, you need a vacation. It's okay. Take as long as you need. I don't want you to kill yourself over this stuff. Now, it's weird that George R. Martin doesn't get that. There's a lot more apparently negative feedback. Just finish the book already kind of stuff. But with
it's because
with
that's
with
the
indie
same problem with
developers.
AAA stuff. It's like they set an expectation, let's say releasing 2024, and then it gets pushed back 2025, 2026, and then people get annoyed and impatient. Like often, like especially if you get rid of pre-orders.
What's your problem? Don't even announce the game. But of course, they have to because they're appeasing shareholders who need a reason to invest. So
and they also
you
have
need
to hit
announce the game so that people also know what's coming and can be excited for it. It's part of the marketing. It's also part of like knowing like I am the dumbass that will take days off work if it's an important enough game for me, and so it's like I will make that plan.
The Dragon Quest in Japan, Dragon Quest releases on a Friday so that it doesn't ruin the work week, right?
The Elden Ring DLC comes out on a Friday, and just like, guys, I'm not working that day. Go away.
Right. Back to games. I think I saw a comment on the YouTube just pop up on our notifications about New Vegas. Yeah. Yes. You guys play New Vegas?
There
it is again.
I've played it a long time ago.
Let me just tell you, Mr. Jonathan Albert, New Vegas is so much better. Fallout 1 and 2 are also so much better. Check it out. That's my recommendation. Anyway.
I mean, I've heard I've never played the top-down ones, but
like if we want to bash on AAA, we can just bash on Bethesda.
Oh well, you know what? I'm the weird guy who didn't even enjoy or understand Morrowind when it first came out. Game of the Year edition, $20.
You don't need to.
I'm excited. I tried to play
it.
It was. I didn't get the appeal.
I never played Morrowind.
It's a lot of the combat wasn't as. I got to Morrowind after I played Chrono Trigger.
It's not menus. It's roll to hit, which is not great. Right. I get that the combat is really not to people's liking, but Morrowind was like my first true gaming love, and it will always be that. And I am actually like setting aside time this year of like I'm going to do another playthrough of Morrowind.
my first Elder Scrolls game was Oblivion, which I loved.
I thought it was. I have this unfortunate spiel that you guys have kind of triggered now with the whole Bethesda and Morrowind thing. It's like Morrowind was weird and it was difficult and it had consequences, and every game after that, it seems like Bethesda's been taking away those consequences, and I hate it. Morrowind was weird. It had like gigantic bugs, skeletons that cities were inside of. It had the mushroom trees. It had the silt striders, and it was alien and incredibly atmospheric. And then Oblivion, it wasn't bad, but it was Europe. It was very much more generic, and it wasn't taking the kind of edgy steps to take risks.
How was Skyrim?
Skyrim was boring.
1 hour into the spiciest take yet.
Skyrim was boring to me because like I applaud their like the music and some of how things looked, but it was the writing that really like I was bored because the stories were boring. It was go get this thing, fetch quests. It was go get me 10 of these things versus like in Morrowind. I remember like one of the small like Mages Guild quests of doing of like this person is sending you off into this area of like go get this book I put for somebody, and oh by the way they might attack you because they're kind of crazy, and in the dialogue you can see of these people it's like she was setting you up to kill her rival, but you have to read between the lines. You have to actually engage in the story to be able to understand it, but it's so much more full to it. They have lost their ability to write stories throughout the years, and I hate Bethesda for that because Morrowind was my favorite.
I will say I think Skyrim was a pretty fun game. I put a fair amount of time into it. I did the thing I love the most in the Elder Scrolls games is the Black Hand storylines, and I think Oblivion, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Oblivion one was so much better than Skyrim.
Yes, because lots of different reasons. But like in Skyrim, ultimate thing. It's like you kill the emperor and then nobody notices. There's no change to it. It's like if you just killed the emperor, that's a huge thing. Like the game can no longer look like the way it was 5 minutes ago, and yet no one cares. The sense of cost is gone. It was creepy when you're inside the coffin and then the corpse starts talking to you. I'll give him that cinematic moment. It was fun. The Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion, the best quest that they did was when you're in the house and the manor and you're trying to kill people and they don't get to know who it is. Like it was just
I love
really
that.
kind of fun and goofy. But then, like, if you follow the story, it just kind of lost its mind. It no longer made sense. It contradicted itself in terms of like who was doing what, and like there always seems to be like, oh, you have to kill everyone else in the Dark Brotherhood now because reasons. And like that was supposed to hurt you, and it was just not. And I'm so frustrated with Bethesda and how they've treated the stories and how they've kind of like watered things down.
Is it because there's a lot of the Radiant quests and everything's kind of bland and samey? Because that was the problem with Fallout 4. Well, that's the whole. If you played Fallout 4, another settlement needs your help. Okay, well, AI it was the AI generated or scripted infinite quests that are all just the same. Go here, kill. Go here, kill. Or go here, collect. Fetch quest, that kind of thing.
Probably. I'm sure something like that can be done in a way that I can enjoy, but if it's not compelling, because however it's generated, it's still like compelling, and it's something that it is a puzzle to be solved more so than or like a fight to lose really in Dwarf Fortress. But if it's here's a thin veneer of a story, but go get me 10 of these pieces in Skyrim, there's nothing to compel me to do it. The only time that I actually felt invested in playing Skyrim is when I decided I wanted to buy a house to put all the stuff that I wanted to keep because I'm a hoarder. And I needed to figure out what was going to get me the money to be able to do it. Like that was me making something driven to do something in the game. The game was not doing it for me in a way that a game should, of like I should be compelled to want to see the rest of it. And it wasn't.
Yeah.
I think what we ultimately have arrived as we should all just play more Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, here's a spicy take.
It's not AAA, it's AA.
What? Say again, Ben?
Play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Back-to-back enhanced edition.
Those are also good. But
those were good.
I wanna play new games that also looks
I know. That's fine. It's so funny that all these franchises are somehow alive, and like Fallout was the most watched show on. I can't imagine. The game that I checked out of the library because of it said post-nuclear on the cover, and I installed it and never stopped playing. Basically, that game I played back in the early 2000s is now adapted into a television show that people love, which is great.
I haven't seen it, but
I haven't seen it either. But I feel like this must be what Star Wars fans used to feel like when all the new movies and all the TV shows are being made into the Disney machine.
I mean, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Of like they made a TV show and you like it, or is it made a TV show and now they've ruined the thing of your childhood?
You know what? I'm not watching it. And so I'm happy that there is a television show and I'm happy people are liking it. I think generally, I would probably agree with the No Mutants Allowed kind of takes that the direction of the series is kind of misunderstanding that the Fallout series had been a kind of developing lore of a post-nuclear world and how people would continue. And then New Vegas did that better rather than just being straight up Americana.
Who blew up the first town in New Vegas?
The first town, Good Springs?
The one that has a nuclear bomb in the middle of it. That is New Vegas, right?
Oh, that's 4. That's Megaton in Fallout 4.
Oh, okay. I'll do that up.
No worries. But so I kind of get that.
No, I never played 4. Can't be.
There was a bomb in Fallout 3.
Maybe it
Fallout
was
3. Fallout 3, that's what I meant. Fallout 3, yeah. Megaton to Fallout 3. So rather than be like quirky Americana, it was kind of supposed to be this whole other thing of the the weird society and how people would try to understand the world and the ruins around them. And that's kind of what the Fallout 1 and 2 games are doing, and a little bit New Vegas, which the only thing that's really pre-war Americana stuff is stuff connected to Mr. House himself, of course. And so that works because he is a pre-war person, kind of a person. He's a person. Weird.
He's alive, right?
Basically, kind of.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Don't ask hard questions.
Yeah, that's another weird thing. I
have seen a lot of people critique the Fallout show and people defending where it's like, this is not like the game. This is not like the game. Where it's like, people's Fallout experience in the games are very different because you can have a very quirky playthrough. You can have a very serious playthrough. You can have, and so like the tone of the show, where like I think the show is a little bit more on the quirkier side. And a lot of people like, that's the playthrough I had, or like that matches the tone of the game I played. Is what I've seen. So it's like it's hard with these multi-choice, multiplayer, big like kind of games when they get made into a TV show, and like they're like, this does not match how I played the game. It's like we all probably played the game quite differently, ultimately, unless we're Ben and we played the same playthrough every time.
Well, you know what? That's the criticism that they have of the dialogue wheel in Fallout 4 is that you have basically one personality and it's kind of all over the place, but it's still one personality. You get the yes, no, and yes with sarcasm.
Mm-hmm.
Dialogue wheels. Okay, here's another spicy take. The insistence on having voiced characters has been a deleterious effect on video games because the freedom that they had in being able to just write the dialogue and say Morrowind gave you better dialogue than because we don't want to pay a voice actor to do all those many hours. That's one of the reasons that Witcher 3 was so great, is that they did spend all those crazy amount of hours voicing all of those lines, doing it correctly. Which
leads to an expectation that everyone does it, and if you want to cut the corners, that's where you cut the corners.
If you're AAA or AA, you should be doing that.
And there was another reason that I really disliked Oblivion 4 is that they got rid of all the crazy good voice actors from Morrowind and just simplified them down so that every elf had the same voice, like Nord and Orcs had the same voice. Bad decision. Really broke a sense of immersion because everybody sounded the same.
Yeah. In Skyrim, they have different voices, don't they?
I honestly don't remember.
I think they do. I'm not sure.
But the Dunmer voices in Morrowind were amazing, and they needed to keep that. It was very particular to that race. It was, again, kind of alien, but it helped the immersion.
Yeah.
All right. We managed to get 7 minutes over on this no topic.
Hey, it was a good conversation. We talked about Andres's paleo-Marxist politics. We talked about
what? That was like an EG take of saying my country with the wrong name. We're not Marx. What are you? I don't know. No, I'm not. We're not getting into that. It's gonna.
I was saying that's why I said it. It was the joke. It's the meme.
Yeah. Well done. That's Ben being a bitchy, sarcastic person.
I'm not very good at it though.
It's well done. It was in your style of doing the EG thing.
Kudos.
You're gonna do the plug, Andreas?
Oh,
the plug.
Apologize.
Can you tell me the time zone? Then I'll do the plug.
I 1 p.m. Eastern.
1 p.m. Eastern.
Write it down.
1 p.m. Eastern.
11 Pacific.
No, but I'm told I'm gonna have to do 1 p.m. Eastern because I want to do GMT because that's the most used from what I've seen. Anyway, this has been an episode of While We Were Recording. You can catch us live at 1 p.m. Eastern every Saturday, almost every Saturday. Where we talk about anything and everything except the Dresden Files, but every other week it's also the Dresden Files, where you can hear us talk about currently it's casting and TV show development of how we would do the Dresden Files. You can check us out at brokenjars.xyz, youtube.com/the Dresden Files podcast show, and you can help us by giving us some money on Patreon to pay for our website, RSS feeds for the podcast, and generally buy some equipment once in a while. And that is Yes, and you get to join our Discord for the amount of money, whatever amount of money you give us, and join our gift wars and can talk to us whenever you want. And that is patreon.com/brokenjars.